This story is entitled My Biggest Heartache, and it is written by myself, Leanna Simmons. I will never forget that night, not a single detail. I still remember what movie we went to see, the time it started, and where we sat. I remember running up to the very top of the theater, being so excited, until I turned around and saw that you were struggling to even get up the first few steps. I remember the look on your face showing how much pain you were in and how out of breath you were when you finally reached the top and sat down. I remember everything so well because that was the night you told me how bad it was. I remember everything so well because that was the beginning of the end. May 4th, 2013 was the day of the Iron Man 3 movie premiere. My two best friends, Leah, Lindsay, and I, had tickets to go see the premiere. We were so excited that we were counting down the minutes until it started. Once we finally got there, my friend Leah and I ran up to the top of the theater to get the very best seats. When we sat down, we saw that Lindsay hadn't even made it up the first few steps. He was struggling to breathe and holding onto the railing like it was taking everything in him to even be able to stand. Once he finally made it to his seat, Lindsay began to tell us that he was sick and it was not going away. He was in terrible pain and had been for quite some time. Nobody knew what it was or how serious it would get, but it didn't take long before it took over his whole body. Within a few days, Lindsay lost the ability to walk. He had to spend his days lying in bed and had to just pass the time by watching TV or movies. My friend Leah and I spent every single day going to see him, watching movies, and just talking to keep him company. Being around Lindsay every day, I was able to see how bad it truly became and how it took absolutely no time at all to destroy his body. Within the days closely following, Lindsay lost the ability to speak. Even when he could no longer talk, he would invite Leah and me to come over and have a Bible study with him. Lindsay would type out his thoughts and he would have one of us read them aloud. However, after only a couple of days later, he could no longer move his arms as well. We were able to ask yes or no questions, and he could answer them by moving his eyes up and down or left to right. One night, while sitting in Lindsay's living room with his family, they realized he was dehydrated. They called an ambulance to take him to Huntsville Hospital as just a precaution and promised us that he would be back tomorrow. Little did we know this was the last time he would be home for 8 months. In June of 2013, Lindsay was transported to Vanderbilt Hospital in Nashville, Tennessee, because there was nothing left for Huntsville Hospital to do for him. Once he arrived there, he was diagnosed with ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, and was given 4 to 6 weeks to live. This was devastating news that one of my best friends of only 21 years was expected to live only a couple of months. Leah and I immediately planned a trip to Nashville to go visit with him. We did this every single chance we got. About 3 weeks after being diagnosed, the doctors decided they weren't actually quite sure what he had or how long he had to live. We took every single day as a gift and tried not to get our hopes up in any way. In September of 2013, Lindsay turned 22 years old and he was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome and would make a complete, full recovery. The feeling I got when I heard this unexplainable news. For months, I had believed that my best friend was dying, and now I was being told he's going to make a full recovery. My heart was overwhelmed with joy that I had never felt before. All my prayers had been answered, and I was going to get to hear Lindsay's voice and would be able to see him walk again. But it didn't take long until the doctors changed their minds. This time they didn't know what he had or if he would even recover at all. But we were told not to get our hopes up. In February of 2014, the doctor says there was nothing they could do and still had no idea what Lindsay had. He was sent back to Huntsville to be set up on life support from home, and we just had to wait. Wait until he got better, wait until he got worse. We weren't really told anything except to wait, and that's all we could do. So that's what we did. We waited. We waited until his eyes got so infected he couldn't communicate with them very well anymore. We waited until he was readmitted to Huntsville Hospital to have his eyes sewn shut so he no longer could communicate at all. We had to wait for the doctors to run tests to prove that he still had 100% brain activity and that he was completely aware of what was going on but couldn't do anything about it. He was a soul trapped in a body unable to do anything. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. I felt like I was waiting for my friend to die. I loved going to see Lindsay, but once he was no longer able to communicate, in a way it became hard. I hate myself for thinking this then and for even saying it now, but it became awkward in a way to go see him. It was so hard to go sit with someone who I used to tell everything to, and now I had no idea what to say at all. How do you talk to someone who can't talk back? The worst part of this was that I let that feeling take control of me. I didn't want to go see Lindsay as much. I didn't know what to say, so I just didn't. My best friend and someone that I looked to as my big brother was trapped in his mind, and I didn't know how to handle it. It is the most selfish thing I've ever done, and I still to this day have not forgiven myself for it. So in March of 2014, I went to the beach for spring break with a close friend of mine. I planned on going to see Lindsay before I left, but I told myself it would be awkward and that if I waited until I got back from the beach, at least I would have something to talk with him about. So I didn't go. Saturday, March 29th, 2014, at 5 a.m., I was woken up by my friend's mom. I'll never be able to get what she said out of my head. Leanna, your mom just called. Lindsay's been taken to Huntsville Hospital right now. He isn't doing well, Leanna. They're going to take him off life support. Immediately, every time I decided not to go, rushed through my head, and every time I did go but just sat there on my phone instead of actually talking to him, the immediate guilt and heartbreak that I felt, and I still feel as much today as I did March 29th. The morning of Lindsay's death, he was taken to the hospital with a bed sore open down to where you could see his bone and a failed kidney. He only had one of his kidneys from birth, so there was no function left at all. Thankfully, I was able to call and say goodbye, but he was on so much pain medication, the doctors warned me that he may not have any awareness of what was going on. I guess that's good, though, so that I know he wasn't in pain when he went to be with Jesus. The whole time Lindsay was sick, he kept amazing faith. When he was still able to use his arms, he posted on Facebook about how much he had trust in the Lord and that he knew if this was his time, then at least he had great faith in where he was going to be. He never asked why me or questioned God in any way. I prayed every single day that Lindsay was sick, that God would heal him. At first, I was extremely upset with God when Lindsay died. I didn't understand how God could let him go through all of that pain and suffering and not survive to share his story to bring people to Christ. But in time, I've learned that God did heal him with the ultimate healing. I know Lindsay is in heaven with more strength than he ever had here on earth. I know that Lindsay is not gone, for he lives through people like me, my friend Leah, and the hundreds of other lives he had touched by his story being shared. Lindsay's death was my biggest heartache in life, but it has also been one of my biggest joys, getting the privilege of sharing his story to all of those who are lucky enough to hear it. Rest in peace, Lindsay O'Neal Thomas Tyler, September 19th, 1991 through March 29th, 2014.